It arrived on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning that smells of old paper and forgotten rain. I was sitting by the kitchen window, sipping coffee from the mug Ethan had painted for me when he was 10. The colors had long faded, but I still used it every day, out of habit, out of love. When I saw the thick ivory envelope lying on the mat, my heart fluttered the way it used to whenever Ethan's name appeared on my phone. I bent down, my knees aching slightly, and picked it up. His handwriting, neat, decisive, sprawled across the front. Inside was the card. You are warmly invited to the wedding of Ethan Sterling and Natasha, Tasha Rains. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. Ethan. My boy. My world. My only reason for waking up each morning after his father's death. I smiled, though my eyes filled with tears. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, seeing my son find love, building his own family. But a strange chill crept up my spine, the kind that whispers change is coming, and it will hurt. Still, I whispered to the empty kitchen, he's getting married. My baby's getting married. After Michael died, the house turned hollow. Ethan was only 7, all knees and questions and nightmares. There were nights he crawled into my bed, pressing his face against my chest, whispering, "Mom, when will Daddy come home?" And I'd lie, because mothers do that. He's watching over us, sweetheart. He never really left. I worked 2 jobs, teaching during the day, editing manuscripts at night. The bills piled up, but so did Ethan's report cards filled with A's and gold stars. Every time I felt like collapsing, I'd look at him and think, he deserves everything I never had. By 16, he was taller than me. By 18, he had my smile and Michael's easy charm. When he got into university on scholarship, I cried so hard the neighbors thought something terrible had happened. He promised, "I'll make you proud, Mom." He already had. Those years were hard but golden, mother and son against the world. I learned how to fix leaking pipes, he learned how to cook pasta. We were a team. Maybe that's why, when he slowly began to drift away after meeting Tasha, I didn't notice. Or maybe I refused to. The first time I met Tasha was at a cafe downtown. Ethan had called me out of the blue, excitement bubbling in his voice. "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet." I spent an hour choosing a dress, something that said I'm not old, I'm just experienced. My hands trembled when I adjusted my hair. And then she walked in. Tasha was stunning, the kind of beauty that commands a room. Her hair gleamed like polished chestnut, her lipstick was the precise shade of confidence, and she carried herself as if the world belonged to her and she was merely lending it back. "Mrs. Sterling," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand, "I've heard so much about you." Her smile was polite, but her eyes scanned me, the thrift store necklace, the faint ink stain on my sleeve, and filed them away. Ethan beamed between us, oblivious. "Isn't she amazing, Mom?" I forced a smile. "She's lovely, sweetheart." Over coffee, she spoke about her marketing firm, her travels, her plans. She asked about my hobbies, but her gaze kept drifting to her phone. When the waiter brought the bill, Ethan reached for it, but Tasha placed her card down first with a gentle, possessive gesture. Something about that small motion pierced me, as if she'd drawn an invisible line, "He's mine now." As we said goodbye, she leaned in and kissed my cheek. Her perfume lingered, expensive, sharp. I watched them walk away hand in hand, and for the first time, I felt the faint ache of loss. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparations, or at least, they did for Ethan and Tasha. For me, it felt like I was watching a play through thick glass. Everyone else moved in color, I was caught in muted gray. Ethan called less. When he did, his voice was distracted. "Mom, Tasha's parents are handling most of the arrangements. You just need to show up and look beautiful, okay? Just show up." Once upon a time, he used to need me for everything, a shirt to iron, advice on an essay, even his favorite soup when he was sick. Now, I was simply a guest in his new life. One afternoon, I offered to help with the invitations. Tasha smiled, thin and sweet. "Oh, Mrs. Sterling, we've got a professional planner. Everything's digital these days. You don't have to worry." She didn't mean to sound condescending, or maybe she did. Either way, the words pricked like needles. That night, I sat at my desk, scrolling through photos of us, Ethan's first bike, his high school graduation, our trip to the lake where we laughed until sunset. My heart swelled with pride, then cracked with a truth I didn't want to face. I was losing my son to someone who didn't value where he came from. A mother's intuition is like a quiet alarm clock you can't switch off. And mine had started ringing loud enough to drown out sleep. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in gold sunlight. I woke early, dressed in a pale lavender gown I'd bought months ago, simple, soft, something that felt like me. When I looked in the mirror, I saw every year etched in my skin, laughter lines, sleepless nights, and the traces of love that had built a life. I whispered, "You did your best, Grace. That has to be enough." The venue was a sprawling garden estate just outside the city, all marble walkways, rose arches, and fountains singing in the air. It should have been beautiful. It was beautiful. But beauty can hurt when you feel invisible inside it. As I entered, I spotted Tasha in the distance, radiant in her designer gown, surrounded by bridesmaids in glittering pink. She looked like the embodiment of perfection, sculpted by ambition and money. Ethan stood at the altar, tall and handsome, the same little boy who once clung to my skirt at the school gate. For a moment, pride flooded my chest, warm and full. Then the ceremony began. The guests rose, cameras flashed, laughter rippled like champagne bubbles. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, my throat tightened. My heart screamed I do, not because I didn't want them happy, but because I knew happiness built on pretense never lasts. When Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, I caught Tasha's gaze. She smiled at me, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. In that instant, I felt the final snap of a bond one had spent 25 years weaving. During the reception, I sat at a corner table, half hidden by flower arrangements. People danced, glasses clinked, the music swelled. I forced myself to smile whenever someone said, "You must be so proud." Proud. Yes. Proud that my son had found someone. Proud that he had built a life without me. Proud, and hollow. When Ethan finally approached, his eyes soft, he kissed my forehead. "Mom, thank you for everything." I wanted to say, "Don't thank me, just don't forget me." But the words caught in my throat. It was late, past midnight, when I went to freshen up. The laughter from the ballroom echoed faintly down the corridor as I passed by the dressing room. Voices drifted out. Tasha's voice. "She's sweet, but honestly, Ethan, your mom's a bit old-fashioned." I mean, she wore lavender. Who wears lavender to a wedding? Giggles followed, her bridesmaids. Another voice, her closest friend, chimed in. "At least she didn't start crying in public again. Did you see her face when you and Ethan kissed? Tragic." I froze, hand gripping the doorknob. My chest felt tight, every word slicing deeper. Then Tasha again, lower this time, almost cruel. "Honestly, once the honeymoon's over, Ethan will have to set some boundaries. I can't deal with her calling or dropping by all the time. I mean, it's not like she contributed much to the wedding anyway." Contributed. As if love was an invoice. Something inside me broke then, silently, completely. I stumbled away, the corridor spinning. The laughter from inside faded, replaced by the sound of my heartbeat, heavy, ragged. I found a bench outside, under a string of fairy lights, and sat there until dawn. The world around me looked painted, too perfect to be real. Somewhere inside, I whispered, "So this is what it feels like, when love finally lets go." I returned home the next morning. The silence of the house greeted me like an old friend. Every trace of Ethan was still there, his childhood photos, his trophies, the notes he'd written on the fridge. It felt wrong to touch anything, as if disturbing the memories would make them fade faster. Days passed in slow motion. I'd wake, make coffee, stare at the window for hours. The mug, the one he painted, became my ritual. Dalia, my oldest friend, visited one evening. She took one look at me and sighed. "You're grieving, Grace." "I shouldn't be," I said quietly. "He's not dead. He's just gone." "Sometimes," she said, "that's worse." The days blurred into one another after Ethan's wedding. Mornings arrived without purpose, and nights were longer than silence itself. The house that once hummed with laughter and life now echoed with absence. I stopped cooking. The scent of food reminded me of conversations that no longer happened. I stopped turning on the TV because every romantic movie mocked me. I stopped answering calls, even Dahlia's at first. But grief has a strange rhythm. It burns, then numbs, then leaves behind something raw but ready to heal. One afternoon, as the sun poured softly through the curtains, I noticed the old canvas leaning against the corner of my living room. It had been years since I'd touched a paintbrush. Michael used to call me his artist with borrowed time. I pulled the canvas into the light and opened the old paint box. The smell of oil and dust filled the air, familiar, comforting, almost like coming home. At first, my hands trembled. But slowly, stroke by stroke, color began to breathe life onto the blank space. I painted a woman standing in a garden, her dress torn, her face streaked with tears, yet behind her, the sky blazed with sunrise. When I finished, I realized she was me. That evening, I called Dahlia. She arrived with a bottle of red wine and her loud, unapologetic laughter. "There you are," she said, wrapping me in a hug. "I was starting to think I'd lost you too." We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She told me about her daughter, her new hobby of pottery, her latest disastrous date. I laughed for the first time in months, and it felt like breathing again. "Grace," she said, her tone softening, "you gave your whole life to love others. Maybe it's time you love yourself." That night, I took her words to bed with me. They glowed in the dark, like embers refusing to die. 3 months later, Ethan called. "Mom, we're back." His voice was tentative, as if testing the air. "That's wonderful," I said, forcing lightness. "How was the honeymoon?" He hesitated. "It was fine. Can we visit tomorrow?" When he arrived, I noticed 2 things immediately. He'd lost weight, and Tasha wasn't smiling. She looked thinner, sharper, her perfection now chipped at the edges. We sat in the living room. Ethan talked about work, about how the new business venture was stressful. Tasha barely spoke, her phone glued to her hand. Then, as Ethan went to fetch coffee, she finally looked up. "Your house is quaint," she said flatly. "Ethan says you're into art now?" "Yes," I replied. "It helps me understand the things I can't say." She smirked slightly. "That's nice. We might sell some of Ethan's old stuff from here soon, declutter a bit." The air turned cold. "This is still my home," I said quietly. She shrugged. "Of course. I didn't mean it that way." But she did. Ethan returned, cheerful, oblivious. He talked about promotions and possibilities, and I smiled because mothers are trained to do that, even when they see their child walking toward a cliff. A week later, the truth began to surface. I received a call from one of Ethan's old colleagues, a kind man who had always admired his integrity. "Grace," he said hesitantly, "I don't know if you're aware, but Tasha's been making some risky decisions in his name. Financially. There are debts, investments, transfers. He trusts her too much." I thanked him, my heart pounding. When I hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the painting on my wall, the woman standing before sunrise. And I knew. The revenge I once imagined, loud, messy, tearful, was not what I needed. What I wanted was the quiet satisfaction of truth. Of light. Of watching deceit fall apart on its own. It happened 2 weeks later. Ethan came to visit alone, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. "Mom," he whispered, "I think I made a mistake." I didn't ask what happened. I simply waited. He told me about the fights, the manipulation, the realization that love built on control isn't love at all. He spoke of how Tasha had used his name for investments, how the company was on the edge of trouble. When he finally broke down, head in his hands, I reached over and placed my palm on his. "I tried to warn you, Ethan," I said softly, "but some truths can only be learned through pain." He looked up, his voice cracking. "I hurt you, didn't I?" Tears burned my eyes, but I smiled. "You broke my heart. But that's what hearts are for, to be broken, so they can grow back stronger." For the first time in years, I saw my son, not the successful man, not the husband, but the boy who once cried in my arms after scraping his knee. He stayed the night, sleeping on the couch like he used to. I watched him from the doorway, feeling both sorrow and peace. A few days later, I received a message from Tasha, short, bitter, defensive. "You must be thrilled. He's back to his precious mother." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my paint box again. On a new canvas, I painted a wedding veil burning under a sunrise. The flames glowed gold, not red, because what ends in fire can still light the dawn. When I finished, I signed my name in bold strokes, Grace Sterling. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, stood by the window, and whispered, "Let them turn their vows to ashes. I will build my peace from what remains."